Life's become more complicated, especially if you're a person of faith. Things don't always seem black and white. I mean, how do you protect your children from the onslaught of moral compromise that isn't simply popular, but encouraged across our culture? If a loved one invites you to their, say, gay wedding, should you attend? And how does current scientific understanding of the universe's expansion and its development square with the Bible? How do we deal with CRT and all that it entails? Well, hi everyone, I'm Lenny Esposito, and today I bring you a question and answer session from one of our Come Reason's Dare to Defend conferences. Now, these Dare to Defend conferences bring together some of the best Christian thinkers to help you understand and navigate the toughest issues of the day. And the Q&A time, for me at least, is usually one of the highlights of the event. This session I'm bringing was recorded a couple of years ago, but features J. Warner Wallace, Dr. Hugh Ross, Joe Dallas, Becket Cook, and myself engaging with audience members on some really intriguing topics. Now, if you'd like to see more of these kinds of videos, you need to know that our entire catalog of conference sessions for several years, including even this year's event, is available for those who support Come Reason with a $25 or more monthly gift. Just go to comereason.org/defenders to sign up, and you'll be instantly able to access a wealth of exclusive content that's not available to the general public. Your gift is also tax deductible. And so, without further ado, here's the Q&A on this Come Let Us Reason Together.
Question is for Becket. So I'm wondering, you mentioned that you keep loving your child, but you don't affirm them. So let's say you had a situation where you're there for them, but they want to bring their same-sex partner with them to the house for a holiday. Do you let them, or how would you handle that?
Yeah, that actually happened with me. I ended up one year bringing a boyfriend home for Christmas to my parents' house, and there was an emergency meeting. My family called because they found out I was bringing him home, and my siblings were actually up in arms about it, which was, upsetting to me. But my parents were not. They said, just bring him. And, they asked us to sleep in separate bedrooms, which we did. But, and that, I think, I don't know, you guys, I don't know what you think about this, but my parents, I think that it's different from going to a gay wedding. I think that in this case, I think it's okay to do that and let your child's boyfriend or whatever come stay, but just not, stay in the same room.
Mm-hmm. So would your parents just simply kind of ignore the relationship, or, obviously they had to talk to your boyfriend then, right? But they were not affirming and...
Yeah, they weren't affirming at all, but they were super loving to my boyfriend. Okay. They were so welcoming to him, and but he knew what they believed. So that's the key, is being clear about your convictions, but then loving people generously. So I really appreciated that about my parents, about that they allowed him to come home with me, because had they banned him from coming with me, it would have been a really big strain on our relationship. So I was happy that they did that.
Mm-hmm. And one more question. Have you had a situation where you didn't go to a gay wedding and those friends cut you off?
In what?
Did those friends cut your relationship?
Oh, yeah, no. No one invites me to gay weddings anymore. I actually, right after I got saved, I did go to my agent's gay wedding. He married a man, and it was a disaster. Because I thought, I'm going to be such a good witness, and I'll be so loving, and this is going to be great, and I'll show him how much I love him. But as soon as I got there, and there's 400 people celebrating this union between two men, I was like, whoa, like this is not, I should not be here. And it was one of the worst nights of my life. I'll never, ever do it again. And I urge everyone not to attend gay weddings or gay receptions, because you're celebrating, you're there to celebrate sin, basically. And you can't do it. You can't, as hard as it is to say no, God's gonna bless you for saying no to that.
Thank you so much.
I think it's interesting that we make these kinds of distinctions. Is it fundamentally different if your son brings home a girlfriend?
It is.
With whom you're not married?
It's fundamentally different because it's not unnatural. So
right, but there's still a sin aspect.
There's a sin, but there's a. I mean, you can talk to this too, but it's not. There's a deeper. It's more. It has to go. I'll have to just go back to the nature argument. It's as Paul says in Romans 1. It's unnatural.
Right.
So it's more. It's a more severe thing, I think. I'm not articulating this well right now.
I understand what you're saying, but I do appreciate the idea that you still have to weigh the fact that this is an individual who has a very important portion of your loved one's life. So it's not, it's not like, hey, can I bring my buddy John over, we just shoot hoops once a week. It's bigger than that. And there's a context in which, as a parent, I think you're wrestling with the idea of, if I say no, you're not merely denying me for who I am. You're saying that everybody I care about is tainted, and that it's a much more difficult structure. And it's difficult even in heterosexual, non-marital relationships, because that aspect errs as well. But I guess my point is, let's make sure that we're as consistent as we can be in those. But I appreciate your parents kind of walking that razor's edge of saying, okay, here's an individual that we recognize there's a bond there of some significance, but we don't want to ignore the fact that bond has a problem. And so how do we split that difference?
If I could point out, when I was living an openly gay life, I was on 2 different occasions able to bring a partner home to a family event. And as with Becket's family, they of course would not have allowed us to sleep in the same room. But my parents both made it very clear to me, you cannot do anything that will change our regard for you, but likewise, you cannot do anything that will change our position. So do not try to back us into a corner. And if we can operate with mutual respect, of course, this man is welcome. We are not celebrating your relationship, but we are respecting the fact that this is someone important to you without condoning the nature of the relationship. And I don't feel there was any compromise involved in that. I really don't. Whereas I strongly agree with what Becket is saying about attending a wedding. Whether heterosexual, a homosexual wedding, I do not believe is literally a marriage, but still, I believe that if a heterosexual wedding is being held in which perhaps a man has dumped his wife to grab a younger woman and he's marrying her, I could not go and say by my presence, I bless this union. So if I cannot say I bless the union, I don't believe I have any business being at the wedding ceremony.
Well, just to continue on this theme real quick, thank you all, by the way. Absolutely fantastic. My head is full. And Lenny, you said there will be videos available? Yes. Excellent. So we can recap that. Thank you. Becket, I did want to point to you, if I could, on what you just spoke about. Our family has been deeply involved in theater pretty much our whole lives. That world obviously touches your world. We've had numerous situations where we have gay people in our home. We felt we had a rescue situation, a young man, his family, his father threw him out when he found out he was gay. He was college age. We allowed him to live with us for 3 months, etc. He knew again where we stood. He's gone on to Broadway, done things along that line, and since he knows where we stand, he will occasionally not have contact with us, then will call me and say, I got this part, etc. So we never pull back on what we have. But specifically, there have been 3 times there are family people that we know and families in which they, in particular, I'm going to think of one situation where a young lady that we've known, watched her raised, she was in a gay relationship for almost 20 years, and she left. She moved out. She started going to church, made new friends, and told my daughter that one of the things that made it easy for her to change was that every time she was with our family again on holidays or other things she was invited to, she always felt safe and respected. Her humanity was respected. And so I just wanted to follow up with that. Thank you for that very much. And one last question. You're talking about cultural situations. What about Modern Family? Any thoughts on that?
I've never seen that show, so I don't know much about it. But I'm sure it's demonic in some way. No, I don't know. I haven't seen the show.
Thank you very much.
Brass tacks. I'm a brass tacks kind of guy.
Well, changing the subject a little bit, I had a question for Dr. Ross, and something I've thought about. I was just wondering if anybody had calculated, based on Einstein's formula equals mc squared, the amount of energy it would be required to form all the matter in the universe. To create all the matter in the universe, how much energy would be required based on Einstein's formula? Has anybody calculated that?
Well, what they have calculated is just because, E equals mc squared says you can take matter, turn it into energy, or take energy and turn it into matter. What astrophysicists have been able to do is determine how much matter energy do you need in order to have life in the universe. And so we know that the universe has to be precisely the total amount of matter and energy that it possesses for life to exist. And they've calculated the fine-tuning. Change the total mass of the universe by as little as 1 part in a quadrillion, 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 quadrillion. There's no possibility for life anytime, anywhere in the universe.
Wow.
And all that matter that we see in the universe, the stuff you see through the telescopes, that's only 0.27% of all the stuff of the universe. So when you ask the question, does God really care about us? He cared about us enough that he didn't think creating 2 trillion galaxies was too expensive. Well, that adds up to only 0.27% of the stuff of the universe, or they had to carefully fine-tune it to 1 part in 10 to the 60th so we could be here. And incidentally, that's not the best example. We actually see other features of the universe where the degree of fine-tuning is even more extraordinary than that. And so all this was created so that you and I could have a home on here, planet Earth, and be redeemed from our sin and evil.
But they haven't calculated the actual amount of energy to create all that matter. Or is that even possible?
Well, no, my whole point is you can take the total mass of the universe, convert all of that into electromagnetic energy. It's the same number. So, yes, we do know how much needs to be invested in terms of how much of the total amount of matter and energy must exist in the universe for life to possibly exist in the universe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon. Wow, this has been great topics. Sort of on the same vein for Dr. Ross and for Lenny, because here at Living Truth, they used to have the Truth Academy, and the very first class I audited, Science and Religion, presented by Mr. himself. So I'm going to be volunteering to help out with the released time Christian education coming up. And part of the discussion that I saw, or some of the curriculum, talked about a topic. And to me, Christians have misused, or the term somehow got used in the wrong way. The term is the Big Bang. And what I've been hearing from some pretty influential Christian leaders who I really respect, it seems like when they start talking about God created the universe, there's an idea that atheists say Well, they say the Big Bang, but we know God created the universe. But the Big Bang was just, as I understand it, a pejorative term because everybody thought the universe was static and did not have a beginning. So if Christians, put down, quote unquote, the Big Bang, they're putting down the idea that the universe had a beginning. So Dr. Ross and Lenny, could you guys please kind of clarify that just so everybody can have confidence in, the Big Bang?
Yeah, you'll find a history treatment of it in my first book, The Fingerprint of God, where I tell the story of how it was a Belgian priest that first proposed the Big Bang creation model, Abbé Georges Lemaitre. And when he did, it got a very strong negative reaction from most of the astrophysical community because they immediately saw the biblical connection. If it's Big Bang, there's a beginning, there's a cosmic beginner. And they also recognize that with the Big Bang, it actually says the same things that different Bible passages say, how the universe has a beginning, including the beginning of space and time that I mentioned last night. Talks about how the laws of physics don't change. One of those laws is a pervasive law of decay, what we physicists call thermodynamics. But if that's the case, it's a universe with a beginning that gets colder and colder as it gets older and older. And it's interesting, I was having a discussion with some people last evening, how they said, who is really the first to talk about Big Bang cosmology? And it was actually Jewish theologians living 800, 900, 1100 years ago. You look at the writings of Maimonides and Nachmanides, they quoted the Old Testament, how it spoke about a beginning to the universe, how we have constant laws of physics, this pervasive law of decay, and there's 11 texts in the Bible that speak about how God stretches out the heavens, expands the universe. And so it really wasn't Edwin Hubble or George Lemaitre. It was people like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Job, and David that spoke about Big Bang cosmology. And what's interesting about the first half of the 20th century, when the Big Bang model was proposed, it led to a young universe, old universe debate. It was the famous British mathematician, Eddington, Sir Arthur Eddington, had said, we got to get rid of this Big Bang. It only gives us a few billion years. There's no way we can save Darwinian evolution if all we got is a few billion years. And for a 50-year period, there is a debate going on in the astrophysical community. Is the universe quadrillions of years old, or is it only billions of years old? What happened in the second half of the 20th century, the young universe astronomers were vindicated. It's only billions of years old. And whatever illusions the biologists had, the astronomers recognized if we only got 10 zeros after the one, there's no way we can sustain a naturalistic interpretation of life. And so it is ironic that within the Christian community, you got people saying the Big Bang is an atheist idea. No astronomer would agree with that because they recognize the ones who are committed to atheism are committed. In fact, I'm writing an article right now in a peer-reviewed journal making the point that the remaining anti-Big Bang astronomers are all saying the Big Bang can't be correct because if it is, then there's this God, and it's a God of the Bible. So we got to get rid of this. So the only astronomers I know who reject the Big Bang are people who are committed to an atheist worldview. So thanks for bringing up the question.
So Big Bangs require Big Bangers. Is usually the way it's and Hugh's right. Maimonides had the opening line of Genesis, Barashit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. 7 words describing God created the heavens and the earth. That first bet, that B, that starts it is closed on 3 sides, Maimonides said, and only open toward the rest of creation. So we cannot know what God did on those other 3 sides. We can only know what God did in the beginning. And to his other point, it was, I believe, Robert Jastrow in the 80s gave a very famous interview where they asked him about this question. And Jastrow, who was head of NASA at the time, said, well, it's kind of a nightmare, you see, because we have the physicists and the scientists who feel that they're crawling up on this cliff, scaling the cliff of knowledge, pulling themselves up on the last peak to understand the beginnings of the universe, and they find that there's a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. So,
well, I can tell you a personal story on Robert Jastrow. Two of his graduate students came to my skeptics class that I have on Sundays, and I said, why does Robert Jastrow call himself an agnostic? What he writes, he's clearly promoting a Christian worldview. And their answer was, we asked him the same question. And his answer was, the reason why I call myself an agnostic, I don't want to answer the follow-up question.
Ooh. Wow.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. It's a privilege to see people I've heard about and read about a little bit, to see them in person. And I'll definitely take all this that I've learned back to my neighborhood and to my workplace. A question for Dr. Ross. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the Webb telescope.
James Webb Telescope? Well, if you follow my Facebook page, I keep you up to date on the latest images coming from James Webb. And unlike other astronomers, I give you about a 2-paragraph description on how the image is giving us even stronger evidence for the Bible and the existence of God. It tells us in the Bible the heavens declare the glory of God, but here in the LA area, on a really clear night, maybe you can see 30 stars. Doesn't really declare much at all. I've been in Beijing, I've been in Shanghai. You can't see a single star even on the best night. In fact, it's challenging to see the moon unless the moon's right overhead. So the heavens aren't really declaring anything much at all in some of these big Asian cities. However, we do have the James Webb Space Telescope. People might not be able to see 15,000 stars with a naked eye like Abraham could. You can't do that anywhere in the world right now. But we do have these amazing space telescopes that are revealing things. And there's an array down at the South Pole that's actually able to give us an image that shows us what the universe was like when it was 100 billionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second old. The power of astronomy is we got direct access to the past. We have no idea what's happening in the present because all of our light comes from the past. But we now can see so far away, we can directly watch the universe being created. And that's where we get some of the most compelling, rigorous proofs there must be a God. And what I find phenomenal, we humans are living at the only time in the history of the universe where we can directly witness 100% of the history of the universe. If we were put here, say, 5 billion years earlier, we'd only be seeing 2/3 of the past history of the universe. Or 5 billion years hence, we again would only see the past 2/3. We're living at the one time when we can read the entire book. I think somebody wanted us to be able to read the whole book.
Just wanted to say, absolutely phenomenal weekend. It's been amazing. And I've got a few questions. Excuse me, I've blanked on everyone's names. I'm terrible with names. Mr. You in the glasses, what was your name again?
That's good. That's enough. Becket.
That's just one question.
All right, Dr.
That's it. That's how you do it.
For Dr. Becket.
I like that. So, Dr. Becket.
All right. So the Bible, from what I've seen, is very clear on its stance with gay relationships, in that it says that they are a no-go. However, do you have any verses or passages that might help with transgenderism? I'm not sure of any direct, or I don't know of any direct condemnations of transgenderism in the Bible just off the top of my head. So if you could give something, that'd be great.
I mean, I would just go back to Genesis, and Genesis 1 and 2, God created them male and female. And so when you are engaging in that, in transgenderism, when you're engaging in that, or you're basically playing God. When you're calling yourself non-binary, God created us binary. He created us male and female. So when you're saying you're non-binary or you're transgender, you are in fact playing God. So I think that's the most powerful. Joe, that's the most powerful verse in terms of, against transgenderism in the Bible.
Okay. In a similar vein to that, how would you say you should talk to someone who is transgender in terms of their pronouns? Like, should you use their preferred pronouns? Should you put them off?
I would not use preferred pronouns, because what you're doing is you're indulging in more confusion. And you're indulging in a lie, basically. So you're involving yourself in a lie, and so if I see a Christian putting preferred pronouns in their bios on social media, I'm like, you know what you're doing? Even if it's the correct pronouns, you're indulging this idea that gender is fluid, that it's not fixed, and that God didn't create us male and female. And so you're engaging in a lie, and you're just leading more. You're adding to you're aiding and abetting confusion in the world that's already confused. So as Christians, we're to be light in this world. We're not to add to the confusion of the world, because we know the truth. God gave us the truth. He had grace on us, and we have the Holy Spirit. And so, I would never use preferred pronouns.
Okay, thank you. One final question for Monique Duson. How would you give any tips as a heterosexual, white, gender-conforming, evangelical male? Do you have any tips on how you could potentially start conversations with someone who gives into critical race theory, especially those a part of the Black or Latino community?
Well, I would start out simply not from an assumption that just because they're Black and you're white, that there is an issue. I think what we do too often is we buy into the cultural narrative that they're gonna think this about me because I'm white, or they're gonna think that about me because I'm Black. And if we kind of just wait and have evidence, and we just talk to people because they're people, because we have interest in them, that can release some of that tension. So you don't have to go into the conversation thinking, oh, I'm going into this conversation as a white, heterosexual Christian male who is, this age and of this education. Just start out by going into the conversation being you, and allow that person to be them. And if something else shows up, then you can engage with that. You can ask questions about, well, why do you think that? Or, have I led on to make you think that I would think that, all racism is everywhere, or racism isn't real, or, things like that. But I would say start off your conversation not from the assumption that people are going to assume things about you, or that you assume things about someone else, but just going into the conversation because the person you're in front of is someone who is valuable in the eyes of God, who has dignity, value, and worth, who is an image bearer.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I have a question for Dr. Hugh Ross about Genesis 1 and 2. When I've read Genesis 1 and 2, it seems to fit very well into ancient cosmological views of the universe that fit. It's right at home with other ancient cultures like Egypt and Babylon and all the other ones. I've had my coworker tell me that the Bible teaches the earth is flat because it uses the word rakia, or which translated as expanse or firmament. How do we reconcile what we now know about the universe, the the age of the universe, the Earth not being flat like a CD with the account in Genesis?
Well, wait till another few months. I got a book coming out that. No, seriously, I do have a book coming out that answers your question in depth. And in particular, I take on the fact that this word rakia, up until the 21st century, that word was never translated as dome or vault. It's now in 4 of the English language translations. And it's all based on the idea that the ancient cosmologists, particularly in Sumeria and Babylon and Egypt, believed that there was this vault over the earth where you got a subterranean ocean with land floating on top of it and liquid water that goes up over the vault. And a lot of modern day, even very conservative theologians are buying into this and saying, on this basis, we need to recognize that Genesis 1 through 11 is not historical, it's not chronological, it's mythology or mytho-history, and that the ancients really had no understanding of what we consider to be cosmology. I mean, they believed in things. There's also this idea that they believe that the world is flat. And so a lot of what I did, because I took a course on the history of astronomy from Donald Fernie, one of the world's experts on the history of astronomy, when I was at the University of Toronto. And so what I put in the book is the fact that Stonehenge is now known to be an astronomical observatory, actually able to give the people in Britain at that time detailed knowledge of what was happening with the sun, moon, and the stars. And we think that that's unique. It's not. We now know that there are thousands of stone observatories built by the ancients all over the world, that they had a deep understanding of astronomy. And basically, I make the point, the problem is people have looked into this ancient literature and have not been able to distinguish their scientific literature from their fantasy literature. And I argue in particular that this idea that there was this liquid water over a metal dome with holes in it, let the rain come through, it's part of their fantasy literature. It's not their scientific literature. And you can imagine, I mean, we got someone from Hollywood here. What if 1,500 years from now, archaeologists were to dig into the remains of Hollywood and they find these old film canisters of the Flintstones? They say, gee, these 20th century Americans sure believed in really weird stuff. Their science was sure backward. Well, I mean, we all recognize that the Flintstones is a fantasy. It's not reality. Well, what we also realize is every culture has a fantasy literature. We shouldn't be surprised that the Babylonians had a fantasy literature to accompany their scientific literature. But one reason why we know that they were not scientifically illiterate is the fact that astrophysicists today actually cite these ancient records to come up with better models for the interior stars. So, for example, the ancient Egyptians and the Babylonians, they were aware of variable stars, and they recorded the periodicity of these stars literally to 4 to 5 places the decimal. Today we can do it to 9 places the decimal, but the numbers are different, which tells us that these stars 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago were not the same as stars today, that they've been exchanging dust and gas with the partner star orbiting them. And that's actually been able to give us a far more precise model of the interior structures of these stars than if we didn't have access to these ancient astronomical records. And also the idea about the flat Earth, that's not in the ancient literature. They all knew that the world was spherical. The flat Earth story was actually coming out in the 18th century. That's where you first see records of, oh, these ancients believe the world is flat. It's not in the ancient literature. It's in the literature of the Enlightenment, where they're trying to claim that there's been this evolution in intellect, basically fostering the idea that we humans today are more intelligent than humans that lived thousands of years ago, and basically they're interpreting the ancients as being less intelligent than we are. Genesis 1 and Genesis 1:2, What's interesting is if you look at Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 in the original Hebrew, you see that the verbs take a different position in the sentences than they do the rest of Genesis 1. The grammatical structure of Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 is quite different from the rest of the text. And it's a tool that you can use in biblical Hebrew to determine there was a passage of time between God creating the universe and the initial conditions of planet Earth discussed in Genesis 1:2, where it says, before God did anything with the earth, it was formless, it was void, water covered the whole surface of the earth, there was darkness everywhere on the surface of the earth. Then you get into creation, day one. Well, you also see in Genesis 1:2, there's a passage of time between those events and the first event of creation, day one. This is significant because, as you're aware, there's a big debate. Are these days of creation 24-hour periods, or are they long periods of time? Even if you believe they're consecutive 24-hour periods, you can still have the universe billions of years old based on the grammatical structure of Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. And I don't know of any theologian who's fluent in Hebrew who would disagree with that. I've been looking for one. I've not been able to find one that say yes. Both Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 allow for a significant passage of time. The other thing I would add is, in 4 debates I've had with Michael Shermer, the executive director of the Skeptic Society, he insists that the Bible got it wrong in the first verse because the Bible says the universe and the earth were created at the same time. What he's failing to recognize is there's no word for universe in biblical Hebrew. Instead, it has this phrase, heavens and earth with the definite articles, used 13 times in the Old Testament. It always refers to the totality of physical reality. So when it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, it's got nothing to do with planet Earth. It's God creating the totality of matter, energy, space, and time. And the fact that that structure you see in Genesis 1:1 and 2 is indicating there's a passage of time between God creating the universe and Earth being in its primordial state. So there's no contradiction with the established record of astrophysics. Did I answer your question adequately?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a creationist question, but I want to ask anybody but Hugh Ross because he's going to bamboozle y'all. Now you have all these probability arguments, right? Like from Hugh Ross. And so I won't talk about things like after the point of abiogenesis, but anything that caused an observer to exist, that every observer was necessary. And that won't make sense to you, but that's part of the question. For any of those things that are based on like a probability argument, how is it that you could explain this better with, sorry, getting real nervous. This didn't happen the last time we talked. This is like 10 years ago. But for any of these probability arguments, you could have one explanation that, there's this invisible creator, and you could have another explanation that there's just so much variation, or like something like that would produce multiple universes, or that we can't see the rest of the universe if you define the universe as being everything, right? So you could call it a multiverse, or just that there's more to the universe. We'll call it the metaverse, like what is beyond what we can observe or kind of deduce based on science or physics. But you have one explanation that there's like a creator, and then you have another explanation that there's just randomness that just produced any number of quote-unquote universes. And why would an explanation that there's an invisible person, since persons, the only ones that we know of exist in brains,
Okay, so let me see if I can summarize this. So what you're saying is there's an ultimate cause to which we appeal, and for Christianity, our ultimate cause is God. Why can't either the multiverse or randomness over time, I'm guessing, be that ultimate cause? Why do I have to posit a person, especially since, as you say, a person that we know, the people that we know all have brains, and that's what. Am I catching that right? Am I summarizing it well? Okay. So, and Jim, I bet you can talk about this a little bit as well for evidence. Well, first of all, there's a very famous adage that out of nothing, nothing comes. If I have no thing, it can't start itself. So there has to be a something rather than a nothing. And that's a key aspect of creation in and of itself. You can't have something developing without nothing. And you can look at quantum foam and all of this, but there's still problems with that because quantum fluctuations, those aren't nothing. They have potentialities. They have opportunities. There's also time involved. If they're popping in and out of existence, that means that there's a before and there's an after. So there's a time. And if there's a time, you're now relying on one of those things that you're trying to explain, matter, energy, space, and time, as existing. So you've got something and you've got time. So you're not explaining anything yet because you can't explain where those come from. You pull it back to the multiverse, you have the same problem because you have to have a multiverse engine that drives the creation of the universe with such fine detail that it's impossible for it to be removed. And that's just kind of a quick overview of what I would say is problematic by pushing that back. Now, the only thing we know that does create something from nothing is a mind, right? You can think a new thought, and it doesn't necessarily require a creation of matter. A thought is something that's immaterial, but it can come into existence. And so that's why we pull back to a mind, because a mind can be immaterial. We've only seen it expressed in our physical world through the physical brain. That's the conduit, but that's not necessarily what mind is fundamentally. So that would be my quick response. You want to say anything?
It sounds like what you're asking is like, how do we know that this explanation is of higher probability or more, it makes more sense than another explanation? And this is what we're always doing in criminal trials, right? So one thing I learned a long time ago is that I build cumulative cases. I don't bring in one witness to say he did it, because if they can discredit the one witness, what our trial is done, it's over. Instead, I bring in 100 pieces of evidence that, when used in totality, make it really hard to make any other reasonable inference. So as I'm looking, we're always looking for causal agents, right? I think most everyone agrees there's something that causes the universe. The question is this a personal cause or an impersonal cause? Now look at what I see in the evidence of the universe. I think there are 8 features of the universe that everyone has a duty to explain, whether you're a Christian or not. You got the origin of the universe needs to be explained. The fine-tuning of the universe needs to be explained. The origin of life in the universe needs to be explained. The appearance of design and biology needs to be explained. The fact that we have consciousness that emerges out of an entirely physicalistic process, and then that we have free agency, this has to be explained. The fact that we know that there are objective, transcendent moral standards and truths and obligations has to be explained. And we even think that there's true evil in the universe, which means we've got to explain the standard of righteousness by which we could measure something and call it evil. We have those 8 things to explain. And we both share a burden of proof, because burdens of proof are always based on causal explanations. Here's what I mean. If you think there is no God, then your explanation for those 8 things is space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry. You think you can get those naturally. Well, that burden is on the naturalist to show me how you can get the information in DNA, which we know information always comes from intelligence, from mind. You can imagine if I walk into a room and I see there's a dead guy on the ground and there's blood spatter on the wall, that doesn't tell me he's murdered. He could have fallen. He could have had a natural heart attack and hit his head, and that's the spatter. Because physics and chemistry can explain the spatter on the wall. If I walk in, though, and in his blood it says he deserved it, suddenly I'm looking for a killer. Why? Because I can't get that. He deserved it with just space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry. So what we're doing is we're simply saying, given what's in the room, which of these 2 causal inferences makes most sense in front of a jury? And for me, it's because you can't, every one of those 8 things I gave you, you will see that the naturalist has no answer for those. They're divided over the answer. They're making propositions, but they'll often say, we don't know yet, as if to say, we could say, well, we don't know the answer from God's perspective yet. He'll tell us when we get there. That's just God of the gaps to them, right? Well, this is science of the gaps because they can't answer the question either. This is why this is called the problem of mind. Free agency, it's a mystery. We are in a universe that requires agent causation, yet this is not available under a naturalistic perspective. All you have is event causation. So my whole point is, know the whole case, because it turns out the most reasonable inferences are available to you when you know the cumulative case. You can sit on any one piece and they'll say, well, here's an alternative. Alternatives are not explanations. By the way, the alternative that you have for the cause of the universe has to also be able to fine-tune it, provide the information in DNA, and even be the source of moral obligation? Okay, we're starting to sound like this is, whatever you think might start the universe naturally, it can't do those other things. And that's why the most reasonable inference is God.
Perfect. So thank you for being here this weekend. One question we love to ask in the youth whenever we have guest speaker is the question, and with parents and grandparents in here, with the knowledge and wisdom that you guys have today, what is one thing you would tell yourself in high school?
Don't be gay. Seriously, if I could go back in time, I would just be like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to explore this route. This is a bad direction to go into.
Gotcha.
Just say no.
I would say recognize that your high school education is only a very tiny part of the education you need to get while you're in high school.
There we go.
We're just having this conversation a few minutes ago. So I always put it this way, that I think some decisions are more important than others when you're young. So if you are young, let me just throw it to you this way. If you're on planet Earth and you're going to take a trip to the moon and you get about a mile from the surface of the moon and you make a 2-degree error, you're still going to land on the moon. You're close enough. That same 2-degree error, if you make it back here from the surface of the planet of Earth, you will miss the moon by many thousands of miles. So the same decision you can make late in life has less impact than if you make the same wrong decision earlier in life. And I call those decisions trajectory decisions. So what are the big trajectory decisions? I teach at Summit Worldview Conference. It's all high schoolers. I ask this question every session on the porch, at night. Tell me what you think the most important trajectory decisions are for you. And almost always, it's education and career. Of course, the most important trajectory decision is worldview, because that's the platform from which you're going to make every other decision. Decide what is true about the nature of the universe and the nature of the world. But the very next trajectory decision is not about your education or your ministry opportunities or your career. The second most important is spouse. Just be honest. It's spouse. I've known lots of people who have had great careers, but they've been divorced 4 times and life's been a train wreck. I've taken a lot of those people to jail. And I've known lots of people who didn't really make a lot of money, didn't make a name for themselves, but they had a great marriage, and they've got great kids, and they left a legacy. If I could go back and do one thing differently, I'd make the worldview decision earlier. Now, I met my wife when I was 17. She was 15, but I would have married her probably the next year because I just didn't realize how important that would have been. You know, we've been together for 43 years, but it would have been nice to have been married for all those years. So I would say to all of you young people, those are the 2 most important decisions you're going to make in the next 5 years.
I would have told my high school self to actually read the Bible and understand it in context. That's probably one of, like, it goes along with Jim's conversation about worldview, because when you can pick and pull scriptures out of the Bible, but you don't understand them in context, you can argue for anything. I use the Bible to argue for abortion. So, you know what I mean? Like, as a young person, it's so important to understand what the Bible says, but understand what it says in context. I worked in social service for a very long time, and in that, I would bar people's consciences to, or like hold people's consciences to homeless shelters, welfare programs, all kind of things based on Micah 6:8. Well, if you don't understand Micah 1, you really can't get to Micah 6. You don't know who you're talking to, you don't know what your audience is, and what is the justice that is actually being referred to. So understanding the Word of God in context as a young person will change the trajectory of your life for everything else that you do.
I would say practice developing perseverance and self-control. That it is the long game that we're playing, and people don't realize that willpower is not something that's just dropped on you from on high, but it's something that you have to actually practice. This is why Christians have the idea of fasting. Fasting is a way that you practice self-denial the way a pitcher would practice throwing a ball. And you get better at self-denial as you practice it. So Christians are fasting and doing things of that nature simply because it teaches you that your bodily appetites are not the primary things that should be driving your life. And if you understand that long-term goals are much more important than short-term pleasures, you'll go much farther in life, and you'll understand a broader scope of who you are and where you need to be.
I would definitely tell my teenage self, make your choices based on what you think, not on what you feel. Every time I derailed my life, I went with what I felt over what I thought, what I observed and knew. So I would tell myself that. And I tell the kid not to take Bob Dylan so seriously. He's just a guy. He's just a guy.
Thank you.
I already said my piece.
I thank each of you for being here. I am so grateful for how God's using all of you because it's informing all of us, and I'm really grateful. My question has to do with being, I always cry, sorry. Being a mom, I'm sure I'm not alone in this group with children who are deceived by the lies of the culture. And I think, Becket, your letter from your mom is a good example for all of us, but I wonder where we stand up against other churches that aren't teaching our young people to affirm or bad theology. And it particularly made me wonder about Monique. You mentioned that you were an advocate of CRT and then became not. And so I wondered how that transformation happened and how we can do our part, just like you all are doing your part.
So I came away from the critical social theories because of my ministry partner, Krista. So we started having several conversations. I lived abroad for a number of years, and then I came back. And in coming back, Krista and I really just started tons of conversation on all things, race, gender, right, abortion, welfare. Like, we just started talking, and she wasn't afraid to challenge me. And I would push back. Now she's white, and so I just usually went to the race card. Well, that's just racist. You just think that because you're racist. But even in that, she didn't give up on me. She wasn't, well, she just thinks this, so I'm going to let her go. We held on to each other. It was about relationship. So many of the conversations, I think, are about relationship and how we stand with one another in relationship. The way I'm going to stand for, the person I walk by who might call me a racist is going to be different than the way I stand with that person I've been in relationship with. So yeah, I came out of critical social theories because of my conversations with Krista, because of different situations that the Lord put me in, where I had an intern come to work one day and she was bawling, crying because the teachers at her school and other students told her she couldn't speak because she was white. Or the way that, I began to pray and the Lord began to shift my heart. There was a myriad of things that happened to pull me out of it. What I hear in the second part of your question is, like, how do we stand when churches are pulling young people or, not giving the truth? Right. I'm trying to, I can definitely get some things said. So part of it is, as parents, you have to raise your children in the truth. You cannot send your kids to youth group and expect for someone else to disciple your kids. That is nobody else's job but yours. So that would be part one. Part two is you need to fight like hell for your child. Like, hell will raise up to steal your child. And so you are going to have to raise up to fight as hard for your kid. And what I mean by that is, if you know that lies are being told to your child, if your child is sitting under things that are untrue, if your child is being forced to hear propaganda and rhetoric that, they're the oppressor because of their skin color, or that they are the victim, and that their own autonomy and things like that or that they are victims of structural determinism, you're going to have to fight back against that. Our kids need us to actually believe something and then stand on what we believe. And then you actually have to raise your kids. I don't know if I can say this in church. Oh, Jesus. You're going to have to raise your kids not to be punks. Like, you can't raise little Timmy to be like, oh, he called me a name, and then now he falling over and sad. No, we have to raise a generation of young people who are strong enough to stand. One of the things that Krista continuously talks about is, how do we raise our children to understand that they might be religious minorities, that they themselves might be persecuted, that somebody's going to call them out their name. If your kid cannot stand for someone to call them a whatever, we've lost the plot, because that means that they don't understand the truth. See, what is true is what God says about me, not what, Joe Schmo over here then called me. I'm not even, I can't be shaken by what you said about me, because I don't really, like, that ain't for me. That's your opinion. That's not for me. So what brought me out was conversations in the Lord's providence. What do we do in churches that are spewing this rhetoric? You can push back. You can teach your child. You yourself should understand what is this rhetoric that they're spewing. You can't stand against it if you don't understand it. Get in there and read some first sources. Read Critical Race Theory and Introduction by Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanchich. Read Judith Butler. Read Patricia Hill Collins. Read some of these people who have started this movement. Read Karl Marx. You want to understand some of these things? Read Adorno. Read Horkheimer. Read the people who are the originators of what we're seeing today. Read Rousseau. Because we're living in what I'd probably call like a Rousseau world.
Thank you.
And I would say that there's no silver bullet. You have to take each person individually. Seriously, because there's no like, can you just give me the answer for this so I can lay it out for my kid? Well, what's he value? Some are rational, and you can lay out an argument, and you can say, well, look at all the contradictions within this worldview. Others, that doesn't resonate at all, but you can maybe talk about beauty and talk about art, like those aspects of Christ and how he everybody has a different resonance. What is it that he or she is passionate about? And explore that avenue, because they'll listen more.
Yeah, I think my child is susceptible to the accusation of being not Christ-like or not loving, and so is vulnerable. She's an adult child, but is vulnerable to all the things that say, it's not loving to not affirm. It's not loving to not put up the black square. It's not loving to, and so in the name of Christ, she's being distorted or lied to. So I'll do all those things. And I've never even heard of half of those people you just mentioned.
Well, I think that especially in a post-2020 kind of society where, love and tolerance are extremely distorted. Understanding, how are you defining love? And how does the Bible define love? And what is sin? And how does the Bible define sin? And making sure, and very gently, this is a conversation with your daughter, you know what I mean? Yeah. How do you come together and have a conversation of like, well, let's talk about sin. Yeah. Let's talk about what it is. Let's talk about actually what the Bible says about loving someone else and loving them well, because the Bible, I truly believe, gives us what we need for life and godliness. I lost my last thought. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Appreciate you all.
Hi. First question, Becket, you had mentioned that your parents didn't condemn you when you came out, and there was things that were first said and then nothing was said after that. So within our church, we're having kind of this discussion, and so there is a great reluctance to say anything at all. And so what should be the church's response to somebody who says that they want to be in leadership, or they want others to be in leadership, that says gay marriage is okay, or that lifestyle is okay? We don't want to be condemning. We want them to come to Christ. We want them to come to church, but we don't want to say anything against them that's going to turn them away.
Well, two different scenarios, two things. When leaders in the church and pastors aren't clear, because this issue is so dominant in the culture, we have to be clear about it. We can't just ignore it anymore. So if pastors aren't clear from the pulpit about this issue, then guess who creeps in the church and sows confusion? Satan, right? So, yes. And that's why so many people in the church are confused about this issue, because they don't hear it from the pulpit. It's almost like, well, gee, I don't hear it from my pastor, so I guess it seems like this is okay now. It seems like it's okay to be gay affirming. And so I think it's very important for, not every weekend to talk about this issue, but I think it's important to keep it in the conversation, because it's so powerful in the culture. And this happens to be the ideology du jour that is taking over the West. And so it's important to keep that, to make it very clear. On the other hand, at my church, I'll just give you this example. There was a couple, a gay couple coming to our church. And my church is, at that time I think there were 3,000 people who attended my church. So it's a big church. So people get lost in the shuffle. But they came every weekend. They held hands during the service. Nobody really said anything to them. I didn't know, I wasn't even aware of them. But after about a year of coming to our church, one of the guys in the relationship, he's actually in my book, Andrew, he was convicted by the Spirit. And this guy is 20, he was 25 at the time. These kids, they were 25-year-old guys, and he was convicted and ended up repenting of it and breaking off that relationship. And so there is something, yes, we should be welcoming, obviously. Yeah. My church was welcoming to me when I first showed up, like they're not going to turn me away because I was gay, but yeah, so yes, of course we should be welcoming, but at a certain point, there needs to be a conversation like, hey, we've seen you coming here for a long, long time, and you seem to be in this relationship, and we need to address that.
I think part of this turns on the word love as well, that we're really misunderstanding. Love doesn't mean comfort. And that's a really big misunderstanding that a lot of people try to apply today. You don't love your child if you give them cake because they're throwing a tantrum. Matter of fact, discipline is how you show your love. Love means selflessness. Love means doing whatever you can for the betterment of the other, and that's an objective idea of betterment. Church leaders are just that. They're leaders. They are supposed to be shepherds of their flock, and they have an authority, according to Matthew 18, that if you have something with your brother, you go with him initially. Then you take 2 or 3 witnesses. If he still doesn't repent, you take the leaders of the church, because they have the authority to say, hey, this is sin that you're in. Now, I completely agree with Becket that the church is not supposed to be a museum for saints. It's supposed to be a hospital for sinners. And if you come in wounded and bloody, you don't say, hey, you're getting the blood on the carpet. You know, you say, come on in and come back next week so we can treat you some more. But you don't just say, that's okay, and we don't want to offend you. You have to be honest in where we stand, because I think the honesty is a respect issue for the individuals as well.
Thank you. So yeah, just part of it goes to what was being said earlier about the worldview, and just say we get pushback on that. I'll say on Scripture. Sometimes you bring in Scripture and you get the whole language confusion of God is love, do not judge.
Well, you got to put it all in context.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. Sometimes that's why I'm here. It's like, wanting the silver bullet, the answer, and yet it's hard, and you get the pushback of don't judge, and we want them to come to Christ, and we're not really going to speak the truth. This kind of runs through CRT, gay marriage, just a lot of culture that's hitting, I'll say, the church I attend.
If I could speak to that briefly, I was a part of what so many people are talking about now, the Jesus movement or the Jesus revolution. And when I was born again, most of us going to Calvary Chapel of Costa Mesa were hippies. We'd been using drugs. We'd been sleeping around. We were a pretty ragtag group. Now, no one was warmer or more welcoming than Pastor Chuck Smith. He was the eternal dad that you wished you had. He was as respectful and kind as he could be. But I will tell you this, no one left a service of Calvary Chapel without knowing exactly where Pastor Chuck stood. So his clarity was charity. And that's where we have to ask ourselves, do we want people one to us, or do we want them one to the truth? Because it seems to me if we're only trying to make them feel good and not wanting to offend, we're basically saying that our top priority is to be liked, rather than to see people converted to truth. But my sense of truth is that if people are not converted to truth, then they're not converted. And if they're not converted, they're still dead in sin, so what have we done for them? This is where I think we have to ask those hard questions.
I'd also say that to use the scripture, do not judge, is to take scripture out of context. We're also told to judge rightly. And so we don't want to not judge and then just allow everything to fly under the banner because, I don't want to be judging. You know what I mean? No, I'm going to judge rightly, and the rightly is in accordance with the Word of God.
Thank you.
Okay, these last 3, we'll do it hopefully within 7 minutes, so we'll see.
I would just like to say thank you so much for you guys. It's been very exciting and a little nervous, but very exciting. Oh gosh, how do I word this? So in the Great Commission, it talks about the world and how we're supposed to spread the good word and good news to everyone and everything on planet Earth. And my question comes from a friend I had in high school. He was like, aliens did everything. I'm like, what? Aliens did everything? I about the scriptures, what about the flood? He's like, aliens. I'm like, what about the plagues? Aliens. I'm like, okay. And then I thought about it. I'm like, well, what if there was, and Dr. Ross, you're talking about the finitude of life and the fine-tuning of the universe of we're the only ones out here, and because of this rare scenario of circumstances coming together. And then I guess my question would be, if the Great Commission talks about Jesus' sacrifice on the cross for the world, if for whatever hypothetical scenario happens where aliens do come, would we have to rework the definition of the world to, any soul or any sentient life?
Yeah, the only biblical constraint on that is in Hebrews 9 and 10. Jesus Christ died one time, one place for all. That doesn't mean that God couldn't have created another planet with grass on it or dolphins on it, but it does seem to constrain God creating another spiritual, physical, intelligent species like us that's in need of redemption. Although some theologians have speculated maybe they would have the technology to be able to witness Christ dying on the cross even from another planet. But I've written a book on this, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, basically making the point that that kind of technology would require the beings being able to defy the laws of physics. I mean, I'm not a fan of Star Wars or Star Trek because they violate the laws of physics about 4 times per minute. So you really can't go faster than about 1% the velocity of light if you're a big physical being. In fact, there's actually a serious effort by us astronomers to send spacecraft to the nearest exoplanet 4.25 light years away. But we realize we're going to have to send 1,000 spaceships, all of them smaller than 10 centimeters, no faster than 1/10 the velocity of light, and even then, half of them will be completely destroyed before they get there by the density of particles in interstellar space. The other half, they hope, will only be partly damaged and be able to give us some information. But the bottom line is if you're constrained to spaceships that small, you're not even going to get a termite across interstellar space. And again, as an astronomer, everywhere we look in the universe, we see conditions that are extremely hostile to advanced life. And in the community of astrophysicists, there's what's called the rare earth doctrine. And this is the idea, well, maybe we could have a conceivable planet where maybe a microbe could exist for a limited period of time. But if we're talking advanced life, we really are rare. We're unique. We can't even see another super galaxy at clusters. There's tens of thousands of clusters of galaxies. We live in the only one that has the conditions for advanced life. So that kind of localizes things. Then you get inside our super galaxy cluster, and we're discovering we're in the only cluster of galaxies in which advanced life is possible. And you look inside that cluster of galaxies, which has about 5,000 galaxies, we're living in the only galaxy that has the conditions. Then you look at all the spiral arms in our galaxy, we're living in the only spiral arm where advanced life is possible. And there's bubbles all along that spiral arm. We're living in the only bubble where it's possible, where you got a local fluff inside that bubble that is unique. And so we're seeing all the way down the line. In other words, the cosmic fine-tuning is at every single size scale. The universe has to be fine-tuned, the super galaxy cluster, our galaxy cluster, and you get all the way down, you discover in each case, we're in a system that's unique. As I said last night, we can't even find a star that's sufficiently like our star, the sun, to be a candidate in which life is around it. I'm not saying God can't do it. I mean, Christian theologians for 2,000 years have debated the question, is there life beyond planet Earth? And interestingly, you've had evangelical Christians on both sides saying, there's nothing in the Bible that forbids it in terms of, say, having dolphins on another planet. But there's also theologians have argued, when you look at the Gospels, notice how frequently Jesus refused to perform a miracle when asked to perform a miracle. He only performed those miracles that are essential to achieve his stated purpose. And if you look at the stated purposes in the Bible for why God created the universe, it seems like his whole focus is on planet Earth, one species that God intends to deliver from sin, and the fact that you need the entire universe just to get that one seems to argue, yes, God is not wasting his miracles. He's not doing gratuitous creations. He's doing everything that's necessary to eradicate evil and suffering. And I think another crucial feature that people miss, he's doing all this to instruct and teach the angels. They're watching us to learn about the grace of God. We get to personally experience the grace of God. They can only watch it. And for that reason, in the new creation, we'll be elevated above the angels. Because we're getting the training, they're not getting the training, they're being able to observe it. So I think it's crucial in answering these kinds of questions. Look at all the biblically stated purposes for why God made the universe the way he did and why he made us humans the way he did. So, yeah, I think we're it.
Thank you.
I'd like to, I guess, first thank you all and the worship team. It was really intriguing to hear you all and what you had to say. I guess I have a question for Mr. Wallace. I guess I've been like wrestling with the idea, like, can we prove Christianity, or is it an act of faith? Like, is Christianity faithful, like what we're believing in it currently, or can we like full on prove it? And I know, like, dating back to Genesis, it does make sense, a lot of logical sense. What's happening, like, you talked about proving not when it happened, but from the past and the aftermath of what we can see. And dating back into Genesis 1:1, it literally says in verse 1, God, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created space, time, and matter at the same time, and none of those can exist without the other one, so they all had to exist at the same time. So I guess, like, can we prove the Bible, or is it an act of faith?
Okay, first of all, let me just say this. You're in a great place because you're in a place where you can ask that kind of a question, and we love those kinds of questions. I hope you're in a church and in a youth group where they look, yeah, this is what we're about, is answering those kinds of questions. There is no question you could ask, really, that what I've seen is if we aren't willing to ask these questions, then that's where people start to fall out. So be a place that entertains these questions. So here's how the analogy I always use. Right? I always tell juries, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know, but I can't tell you everything that could be known because I don't even know everything that could be known. In some of these cases, I don't know why, when, or how he killed her and what he did with the body and how he moved her car. I can't answer those questions, but I can give you enough. Remember, the standard of proof for anything is not beyond a possible doubt because anything is possible. Is it possible there's no God? Yeah. Is it possible there is no Jesus? Yeah. But it's not reasonable. And the standard is not beyond a possible doubt, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a lower standard. The reason why we lower it that way is because you don't know anything right now. Even your own existence beyond a possible doubt. It's possible that this is all a computer simulation. There are serious philosophers who believe that everything we're experiencing right now is simply a computer simulation. Now, that's possible. That isn't the question. The question is it reasonable? So what we do to determine the difference is I'm going to lay out these facts for you, and I'm going to give you an evidence trail. But my evidence trail is going to only take you so far. At the end of that evidence trail, I'm going to ask the jury to take a step called a verdict. And it's going to be a step across the end of their unanswered questions. So I can get you just so far. Then I'm going to ask you to step across your unanswered questions because I've never been able to answer all the questions that any jury has ever had. I never have. You're going to have unanswered questions because I have unanswered questions, but this knucklehead, okay? Not you, but maybe you. The point is, so that's what we do. We get you to a certain point. It's not a blind step of a verdict. It's actually an educated verdict based on the evidence. And the same thing we're doing with Christianity. This is very biblical. Jesus, there's only two forms of evidence, folks. There's direct evidence, that is simply eyewitness accounts. And there's indirect evidence, that's everything else. DNA is indirect evidence. Fingerprints are indirect evidence. Material, blood spatter, all that stuff's indirect. The only direct thing is eyewitness accounts. And Jesus consistently said, he referred to both those forms of evidence. If you don't believe what I'm telling you, he said, believe on the evidence of these miracles I've worked in front of you. He's pointing to indirect evidence. The Father testifies for me. John the Baptist testified for me. He's referring to direct evidence. All of my disciples, they're going to go into the world in Acts 1 and testify about me. Even when Judas is gone, we're going to pick his replacement as another eyewitness, direct evidence. Jesus is an evidentialist. He provided us with enough evidence, but not everything that could be known. And when we get down that end of that evidence trail, we take that step across our unanswered questions. That's a step of faith. But it's not an uneducated step of faith. It's not blind. It's based on the evidence we have. The more evidence you have in a jury trial, the shorter the step across the unanswered questions. The more evidence you have for this, the shorter the step we call faith. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. That was
Yeah.
really helpful.
I definitely appreciated your conclusion of your presentation. I think it was very poignant because I know that my husband and I are here to be able to teach our kids that. Like, that is a reasonable faith. So my question is, because I feel like we're probably not the only people dealing with this, is that our daughter, I don't want to cry. Sorry. I hate this. Okay. She had a best friend who told her that she was trans. Sorry.
So she's 15, and a couple years ago, a friend from really elementary school into junior high, they were really close, and her friend, after we started homeschooling, her friend, they're texting back and forth, and she says, "Oh, by the way, I found out I'm trans. My preferred name is Elliot," and caused a lot of confusion. We had to have kind of an emergency talk, and I think it sowed a lot of confusion into her too. Just a lot of questions about, what exactly am I doing with this? Because she's trying to process an entire worldview at the time, 13, 14, 15 years old. We're in our 30s. It's a lot easier to kind of take these things in piece by piece. I remember what it was like in the 90s and now how it is. This is all coming at her as part of everything she's learning about what life is. So I think
my question really is, like, how do you handle your kids being friends with people who are in this lifestyle? Because, like you said, Jesus, he interacted with these people, but he didn't invite them into his inner circle. And, we want to be loving. But, I feel like there's this animosity there with her that, we cut her off from her best friend. So.
I do think our primary responsibility as parents is to our own kids and to their protection and their welfare. And each parent has to decide to what extent influences are blocking God's will in their kids' lives. And that has to be our primary concern. It does not mean we are being unloving to people who may be negative influences to them, but it does mean we are recognizing our priorities. Just as we make a distinction between doing everything that everybody in the ministry might want us to do at the expense of our own marriages and our own families. We can't, not because we don't care about the ministry, but because, like Paul said, if you can't run your own house, how can you run the house of God? And I think the same principle applies here. Now, part of it is going to be very, very grievous, and I think this is something all of us are going to have to be dealing with more and more. We are taking positions that people are genuinely viewing as hateful. They're not just disagreeing with us. In many cases, they are truly believing that we are doing severe psychological damage to people just by not affirming them and by insisting our own kids not be influenced by that. And that's not something we can be cavalier about. It's going to hurt. And I think to some extent, at the risk of sounding morbid, Paul said part of his great passion that I may know him, Christ, and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings. This is a part of it. We don't parent people without sharing in the fellowship of the sufferings of the people we love. So I think that we do have to help our kids understand as much as they will be willing to understand it, that they are our primary concern. We are not indifferent to the friend that we are not allowing them to continue engaging with, not indifferent at all. We love them as well, but our priority concern is that our kids be healthy, safe, spiritually, emotionally, what have you, just one other note to this, and I'm sure others have something to say too. A lot of this is, thank God, temporal, and I wouldn't want to offer false hope to it, but there absolutely is such a thing as rapid onset gender dysphoria. This is unfortunately trendy. A lot of kids are claiming these identities, and in many cases not even really knowing what they're talking about. And for all of those reasons, I think it is rational to expect in many cases within a matter of months or even just a few years, this is going to pass. But in the meantime, while the kids' minds are still being formed, we're there to do a lot of the thinking for them. We have to. And I think we cannot abdicate that in the interest of protecting them from the pain of either being said no to or saying no themselves.
Can I ask, is this your oldest? Do you have any others? Two others. Two others. And are the others boys and girls? Boys or girls?
She's our oldest, the others are boys.
The two are boys. So first of all, I kind of feel like we need to pray for anyone who's got a 13-year-old girl, if I'm honest with you. So I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and that's a difficult age you're going through. And I think it's because you're first. You feel like what I sense and I hear in your voice is, it's not just that you're concerned about her, it's that you're probably afraid that somehow you're not doing the right thing, and that in the end you won't be the parent you're supposed to be for your daughter. So I just want to speak to that for a second, okay? Inhale and exhale. God's got this. You're okay. You're doing everything great. I can just tell by your disposition, the fact you would ask this question of all questions you could ask, you're a good parent. You're a good mom. You're going to get through this. It doesn't feel that way when it's number 1. If it's number 4, you're like, hey, we got this now, right? You know, I mean, I have all kinds of pictures of my first. I think that my last one's got her like her driver's license. That's about it, okay? So this is what happens as you have more kids. So I'm just saying that you're going to be okay. So just take a deep breath. You pray about this. We have a tendency to think, oh, that's a lame. No, actually, it's prayer that you notice.
Yes.
Did you notice Beckett's story?
Yes.
Yeah, his mom didn't convert him. His mom didn't argue him into that. She prayed him into that. If you knew me at 34, you'd say there's no way that guy will ever be a Christian. But people were praying me into it. I have a dad right now. He is very stubborn. I have no Christians in my family. He's a very committed atheist. I'm trying to pray him into it. He already knows everything. Your daughter knows what you believe, and she knows the truth. So you're going to have a couple of rough years here. I always kind of think this. I don't even tell me if I'm wrong about daughters. You have your daughter till she's about 12, 13. Then you don't have her again until she's like 23. Then you have her right back in your hands. So just be patient during this season of independence, right? And just continue to speak the truth to her, but also don't doubt yourself, you know? And by the way, your marriage preaches. You can preach the gospel, or you can live the gospel through your marriage, which is designed to be an image of how Christ loves the church. So whatever happens in this turmoil you're about to experience in these years, you make sure you take care of you guys. If your marriage is strong, you continue to date each other, you continue to love each other and show that to your kids, you're going to be okay. Because they're going to want that.
All right. Let's thank all of our speakers and everyone. Thank you for watching this Come Reason video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like these, consider subscribing to our Come Reason YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can follow us on social media. Lastly, if you'd like to help keep these kinds of videos free, consider providing a donation by clicking on the donation button beside me. Thank you.